And on September 26th, while in transit in New York JFK Airport, he was detained by US officials and interrogated about alleged links to Al-Qaeda. 12 days later, he was chained, shackled, and flown against his will to Jordan aboard a private plane, and from there he was transferred to a Syrian prison. In Syria, he was beaten, he was mistreated, and then he was held in a tiny grave-like cell for 10 months and 10 days before he was moved to another, what he called a better cell in a different prison. He was again beaten, tortured, both mentally and physically. Even today, he still bears the psychological scares of his torture. But he lost confidence in his abilities, not to mention the state of depression he is sometimes in. During his imprisonment, I was faced with a kind of a dilemma. Should I just, wait for my husband until he would be released, or should I speak out and campaign for his release? I decided to go for the second one because I think I was, after thinking about it, I said, if I don't speak out for him, who is going to be able to defend him, and who is going to be able to get him out of prison? So I didn't want to fight injustice by silence or indifference. I spoke to members of the media, and I never spoke to media before, and I found myself just dealing with journalists. I also spoke to members of parliaments, and I held vigil with my children, and I delivered many letters to politicians and officials until he was released after a year in October 2003. Once in Canada, my husband and I asked for a public inquiry to determine the role of Canadian officials, what they played into his removal and imprisonment. And after many representation from Canadian human rights organizations and a growing number of citizens who were concerned about the situation of that was exposed by the case, the Canadian government ordered a commission of inquiry, and that was in 2004. And you see, now 5 years later, people ask us, how are we doing today? I always tell them that our life is better, definitely better, but we are still living under the shadow of what happened. Our life can never be the same again. Today, I take nothing for granted. I have become an activist on issues of civil liberties and human rights. For me, there was no choice. I believe that Canadians who value their freedoms and rights must be engaged. If we fall short, or worse yet, if we fail to act when our rights are threatened, we risk becoming complicit in the perpetuation of injustice. You can understand better what Martin Luther King said one time: injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our vision of history should not be myopic, and I would like to remind you, and remind myself as well, that if you take the example of Augusto Pinochet in Chile, for example, who seized power in 11 September 1973, he declared at that time that the country was in a state of war. So we shouldn't really be, saying that things do not repeat themselves. History can sometimes repeat itself in a very similar or, comparable way. Several governments in South America at that time considered the non-active supporters of their regimes as supporters of the enemy. So we can find this dichotomy between you are with us or you are against us. Since a while ago, it was reported that one Argentinian general have said, first we will kill all the terrorists, then we will kill all who helped them, and then we will kill all who didn't help us. So we are living actually in an era, I'm not saying similar to what happened in South America, but we are living in an era where becoming more and more dangerous, and stereotypes become more and more strong. And of course, as individuals, we have to just find our way through all this, and we have to figure out, whether we want to accept this, this very strict this very strict division of the work, or whether we want to enhance more a deeper and thoughtful analysis of the work. So, as you can see, I found myself caught in this word on terror, not as a metaphor, but really caught with the case of my husband, and my family also were in that as well. So after the ordeal was over, and as I said, it's not totally over because we live always through that, but after it is over, let's just think about the consequences of that war on citizens. The war on terror was initiated by the American administration immediately after the attack of 9/11. It is not a classic war with classic methods like tanks, weapons, aircrafts, where the attacker is identified, the soldier identified, the defendant is known, and the victims can be counted. Instead, it is a new type of war, never seen before. It introduced a new international order, still unknown to the general population. It made many international conventions, such as the Geneva Convention, for example, look like obsolete or ill-equipped. This new so-called war on terror affected the lives of many citizens by depriving them from their freedom, by intruding into their privacy. It also affected the lives of families who were caught in this war. For instance, my example, like myself, my children, and everyone who was experienced any type of similar situation. One of the things that became very much apparent and very much spoken about in this war on terror is the use of torture and the harsh interrogation technique, as they are called, in this war on terror. Many decades ago, and since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, one would think that humanity made a tremendous progress in banning torture. What we still see now in the US, for example, is to a certain extent, maybe because of the new administration, things are a little bit, were kept calm for a while, but there was a very strong debate the past years about the possible use of torture. And I think this is strictly my opinion, I think in democratic, in compassionate societies like here, with the one we live here in Canada, the very idea of torturing people, of torturing suspects detained by a state is just, horrible. It is unjustifiable, it is illegal, and above all, it is immoral. And however, despite this, during the past 7 years, since the attacks, we have heard some politicians, some members of the legal community, as well as some members of the public, call for the torture of suspected terrorists if it results in information that can be used to enhance our security. How can we consider using torture as a legal tool and at the same time claim to be a civilized democracy? How can we consider using such methods and then condemn human rights violation abroad? Such methods, first of all, would contravene the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In the US, for instance, 2 years ago, there was a debate about waterboarding. What is waterboarding? It's a technique that makes a suspect talk. So even though more than, at that time, 100 US law professors stated at that time unequivocally the waterboarding is a form of torture and